Sarah Kellen has been very helpful. Of all the people that we've interviewed thus far, this was by far the most substantive and productive interview that we've had. She was very brave coming forward. I can't imagine how difficult it was for her to go into detail about the abuse that she endured at the hands of Epstein and Maxwell. One very positive thing today is she gave us 3 names of people that were involved in abuse. These were new names for us. So we'll be releasing the transcript as quickly as possible. I know there are some names of some victims that she also mentioned that we're gonna have to agree on redactions and things like that. But as far as the men that were abusers, alleged abusers, then the whole world will see that and we'll be able to move forward.
That is not a campaign slogan. That is not a press release drafted by a communications team. That is a sitting congressman walking out of a deposition room, telling reporters that 3 new names this investigation had never formally surfaced before, would be made public. No hedging, no qualifications. The whole world will see. Think about what that actually means. For years, the Epstein investigation has been defined by what stayed hidden: sealed records, redacted names, a non-prosecution agreement specifically designed, according to documents now in the public record, so that an Epstein attorney could email a federal prosecutor and write, "Please do whatever you can to keep this from becoming public." That email exists. It is in the files, and it worked for a long time. Now picture a woman walking into a congressional hearing room carrying all of that history on her back, and naming names anyway. That is what happened this week.
This is a witness that was a personal assistant to Mr. Epstein. She was also a victim of Mr. Epstein. So we're bringing her in. We have a lot of questions about everything from the day-to-day activities to what she saw and what she knows. And hopefully it'll help us as we proceed in the investigation. It's going to be a tough interview. Of all the interviews we've done, this is going to be the toughest one. I'm here to listen and learn. Obviously, I can't imagine the scenario that she was in, and obviously we know enough about Epstein to know that he was a terrible person and he was abusing these women. Now, it appears to me the Department of Justice considered her, not necessarily a co-conspirator, but rather, I don't want to say whistleblower, but someone that aided in the prosecution of Epstein. So we've just got a lot of questions about that. I know how the Department of Justice viewed her. I don't know how the Oversight Committee will view her. We're obviously, she's presumed innocent. She's going to have due process, and I appreciate her being here today. And we certainly look forward to her testimony. But again, it's going to be hard because, there's some that believe she was, 100% a victim or survivor, and then there's some that think she was a victim and victimizer. So it's just a terrible scenario. I've read her story. I've read her opening statement, and I know that this is going to be a tough one for us.
Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Audit the System, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Sarah Kellen is described in a civil lawsuit filed more than a decade ago as, and this is a direct quote from federal court filings available in the DOJ's Epstein Files library, Epstein's key lieutenant, serving as both his scheduler and a recruiter and procurer of girls. That is not a journalist's characterization. That is language from a sworn legal document. FBI interview records, also now publicly available, place Kellen as the person who arranged appointments, made the calls, set up the rooms, and according to one Palm Beach police probable cause affidavit, continued contacting witnesses after investigators had already begun questioning them. One voicemail, dated and timestamped in that same affidavit, has a woman identifying herself as Sarah, calling a witness back specifically to ask about police questioning. 87 pages of phone records. 1 month. That is what federal investigators subpoenaed from a single cell phone registered to Sarah Kellen but paid for by Jeffrey Epstein. The whole world will see. Now here is where this stops being a case file and becomes something harder to categorize, because Kellen did not come to Capitol Hill to defend herself. She came with an opening statement that describes, in her own words, being groomed, psychologically controlled, and sexually abused from the moment Epstein hired her. She says she was 21 years old, recently divorced, excommunicated from her church, living in Hawaii with no degree, no family nearby, no savings. She says Epstein identified exactly that vulnerability and used it. She says, and again this is from her own written statement submitted to the committee, that she could no longer tell which thoughts were mine and which were his.
He groomed me, sexually and psychologically abused me, controlled me, manipulated me, dominated me, and gaslit me until I could no longer tell which thoughts were mine and which were his. According to the report from ABC, Kellen says that she was working at a hotel out in Hawaii when she was recruited by a coworker for a job with Jeffrey Epstein. And she says she had gotten married when she was just 17 years old, and that after getting a divorce, she was excommunicated from her church, so you're talking about a very difficult time in her life. Her statement, according to ABC, continues, I was 21 years old, far from where I grew up, stuck on an island in the middle of nowhere with no college degree, no family, no friends, no money, and nowhere to live. And she claims that that situation made her a perfect target for Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, after months of unpaid labor, he instructed me to draw him a bath on his island, then ordered me to undress and get in with him. And he said, the job is yours. Now you just have to keep it. He then pulled me onto his bed and made clear what keeping the job required. Only after I submitted to his sexual abuse did the paychecks begin. She goes on to say, he knew everyone in the fashion industry, academics, finance, government, powerful world leaders, dictators, and everyone in between. From the beginning, he showed me that he was more powerful than basically anyone in the world. Jeffrey was able to fool and manipulate the brightest minds in the world. Us victims didn't stand a chance.
That is either the most chilling description of psychological coercion in this entire investigation, or it is the most sophisticated legal narrative ever delivered to a congressional panel. Possibly both. That question does not have a clean answer, and anyone telling you it does is not following the evidence. What the evidence does show is this: a 2007 non-prosecution agreement, which is a publicly available federal document, explicitly shielded Sarah Kellen from federal prosecution by name. It names her alongside 3 other women. It was negotiated in secret, and according to Kellen's own opening statement, she had no knowledge her name was in it until it became public. The federal government, she says, branded her a criminal in a secret deal made with her own abuser without once asking her a single question.
In an email that recently became public, an attorney for Epstein said to a prosecutor on the case, quote, please do whatever you can to keep this from becoming public. And this agreement basically shields Epstein and 4 co-conspirators, or alleged co-conspirators, females who work closely with him, from being prosecuted federally. It reads in part, in consideration of Epstein's agreement to plead guilty and to provide compensation in the manner described above, if Epstein successfully fulfills all of the terms and conditions of this agreement, the United States also agrees that it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including, but not limited to, Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, or redacted. The redacted name there, probably Ghislaine Maxwell. She's been fighting the federal government for years to get her sex trafficking convictions overturned. Her attorneys say this NPA protected her from prosecution, and I will tell you, it hasn't been a winning argument. So far, appeals have not been successful, and she's still serving a 20-year prison sentence. Now, I will tell you this, okay? When it comes to the NPA, Kellen seems to say now she had no idea it was even a thing. ABC News reports that in her opening statement for this interview on Capitol Hill, she said, quote, no one from law enforcement ever spoke with me, ever heard my side, ever asked me a single question. I did not even know my name was in that agreement until after it had been signed and released to the public. The federal government of the United States branded me a criminal in a secret deal with my own abuser without ever once speaking to me.
The whole world will see. So who are the 3 names she gave Congress? According to sources who spoke with News Nation following the deposition, the alleged abusers named by Kellen are hair industry figure Frederick Fekkai, former Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine, and the late fashion photographer Patrick Demarchelier. Demarchelier died in 2022. He held royal photography credentials and worked across major fashion publications for decades. Fekkai's name appears in Epstein's own email records, and according to reporting based on the DOJ files, Epstein's credit card statements show substantial spending at Fekkai's salons on behalf of multiple individuals. Levine, for his part, told a newspaper in 2019 that he barely knew Epstein, that they probably met at a social event 15 or 20 years ago, and exchanged business cards. Email records reviewed by journalists suggest the relationship was more sustained than that.
And those 3 men have now reportedly been named. So sources have told News Nation they are, and again, these are allegations, hair mogul Frederick Fekkai, former Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine, and fashion photographer Patrick Demarchelier. Now, Demarchelier died back in 2022. He was known for famous portraits of everyone from Princess Diana to Janet Jackson. He worked closely with fashion magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. He was also an official royal photographer for the British royal family, which is interesting given former Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein and the rampant allegations of sexual assault and abuse that have been leveled against him. When it comes to hairstylist Frederick Fekkai, Bloomberg actually published an article earlier this year after uncovering his apparent connection to Epstein and the thousands of files that were released by the DOJ. And according to Bloomberg's reporting, Epstein had accounts at Fekkai's ritzy New York salons. Reporters combed through Epstein's credit card statements and they found that he spent a crazy amount of money at Fekkai's businesses, paying for expensive hair and spa treatments for a lot of different people, including, the allegation is, former White House counsel Kathy Rumler. Fekkai often appears in Epstein's emails, as previously acknowledged flying on his private jet.
Now here is the question this entire case keeps circling back to, and it is not a rhetorical one. If the names in that deposition room are released unredacted, as committee chairman James Comer indicated they would be, and if those names include individuals who are still living, still operating in public life, still holding or having recently held positions of civic authority, what exactly does it mean that the investigation has arrived here? In this particular moment, through the testimony of a woman the federal government itself once described in its own internal records as a victim of the same man she allegedly helped. The whole world will see. But the more important question is, what happens after it does? The full text of the 2007 federal non-prosecution agreement involving Jeffrey Epstein and the named co-conspirators is publicly available through the DOJ's Epstein Files library at justice.gov. We want you to read paragraph 4 of that agreement and then come to the comments and tell us one thing. Do you think the names listed in that document were protected or buried? If this investigation matters to you, like this video, share it, subscribe to Audit the System, and turn on notifications, because when the deposition transcript drops, we will be going through every line.
Now, I will tell you, from a legal point of view, it is bold for Sarah Kellen to name names. And if the transcript comes out of her interview and those names aren't redacted, which under the law, they're not supposed to be, big accusations. Why? Because there has already been a lot of talk about how the victims should come forward and publicly call out their abusers, name names, shame them. Now, the difficulty with that is of potential repercussion. And there's also evidence, right? If they don't have corroborating evidence to support these claims of abuse, and there's nothing in the Epstein files to definitively back up these specific claims, that could be why maybe you don't have a number of people coming out and naming names, potentially opening themselves up to liability. Now, if they tell it to the lawmakers and the lawmakers reveal the names, that's kind of a different legal issue there. But for her to reportedly publicly mention these names like that, I mean, it does become a very interesting question as to her credibility. She didn't have to do this. The reports are true that this is who she named. Significant to say the least.
None of the three, nor Kellen's attorneys, provided comment at time of publication.